we just got to talk about this Jeffrey Epstein shit because, I mean, I've been following it. We talked about it a little bit over the weekend, but like since then, the case has only gotten weirder. And, you know, if you've been listening to us, I'm sure you're familiar with the details of this case. But the question I'm asking myself now, as more and more of this stuff comes out, is prior to, I had assumed that, you know, he was a billionaire hedge fund guy whose wealth allowed him to get away with all of these ghastly crimes and shield him from any sort of prosecution or anyone looking too deeply into it. But now, as more is revealed about his quote-unquote hedge fund, the question needs to be asked, was he a billionaire because he was doing crimes, or was it the other way around? Like, it's very hard to say because apparently there's almost no evidence that he had a hedge fund at all.
Yeah, he was a quant at Bear Stearns, and then he just got plucked out of nowhere by Les Wexner, the kingpin of Victoria's Secret, given power of attorney and a mansion by him, and then shortly after he popped open this hedge fund that was only they said it was only for people who had $1 billion to invest, and it immediately became incredibly popular, even though there were only 13 billionaires in America in the 1980s. It's like, where the fuck did the money come from?
And not only that, but like also his hedge fund employed no analysts or like anything like that would be like
didn't publish results either. Like didn't publish a record of its performance.
And that he got power of attorney over all of his clients, which is also very odd. And I guess like the broader question is, at what point can you say that like the sort of pop culture, because you know us, like I'm very into James Ellroy and conspiracy theories, like True Detective and shit like that. At what point can you say that like the pop culture depiction of like the world of power and its depravity is in fact not adequate? Isn't like not only not exaggerated, but in fact not adequate to convey the scope of evil at the highest levels of like financial, military, political, and quite frankly, entertainment power? Like, is there any, like the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or the Red Riding trilogy from Britain? I remember when I first saw those movies, I was just like, wow, that was scary and evil. But you know what? It's a bit too much. You know, is it really realistic? But the more you learn about this shit, it's just like, no, they were, if anything, like not broad enough in their imaginations.
So if I've been out of the country a lot, so I'm sort of new to this, but if I'm understanding this properly, the implication is they put him in place as a pimp for extremely rich guys who like pubescent girls.
Yeah.
But what's more than that, like the question again is like, was he a pimp or was he just running a blackmail racket? Because if you're just a pimp, you are, for like the most powerful people in the world, and they feel the slightest bit of pressure, you're instantly disposable.
Right.
There was the case, of course, of the DC Madam, the one who brought down David Vitter and his diaper fetish, who, killed herself under suspicious circumstances.
I think it's double. I think for the billionaire types, it's a transaction. You know, he gives them access to discrete access to what they want, and then they park their money in his hedge fund, and he collects a percentage of it. But then for people like the Clintons and the political figures and the entertainment figures, it does have the function of being the protective layer, like the thing that like makes it impossible to like they could be comfortable that this isn't going to come back to them because it's just too big of a can of worms to open if he ever gets arrested, which is exactly what happened the first time he got nailed in the aughts. And
that now the guy who presided over that sweetheart deal in which he did 13 months of like work release, day camp prison, most of which he spent in his office in New York. It was like the Dinesh D'Souza thing. Like you go to jail on the weekends and, he was traveled out of state and including to his fucking, the Virgin Islands while he was supposedly incarcerated. Alexander Acosta, who's currently Trump's labor secretary, was the guy who made that deal. And as we've talked about before, the big part of that deal was not the fact that he did almost no actual hard time for the scale of the crimes he was accused of, is that it immediately stopped any further federal investigation into his co-conspirators. And like he was given a deal, as you said, Matt, not to squeal on people, but to not squeal on people.
Right, yeah. Preemptive immunity for anyone unnamed co-conspirators involved. That's the exact opposite of how any prosecution of a conspiracy case ever goes.
And Acosta, of course, is now Trump's labor secretary, who had the balls to tweet today that he's very proud of the Southern District of New York for, picking this up, or he said, we prosecuted him or whatever. Nancy Pelosi, of course, said today about Acosta that the Democrats will not be pursuing impeachment against him. You can impeach a cabinet secretary just as easily as you can do a president, and they are not going to impeach or even look into that at all.
Well, that's smart on her part, though. I mean, you can't blame her for that. Like, this is the thing. Like, I see people criticize Pelosi all the time, and I really think that you don't understand what her job is. Her job is to protect this party and this caucus. Why would she open an investigation that might end up revealing a video broadcast on all networks of like Bill Clinton wearing a ceremonial headdress, like eating a baby's brain like an apple? Like that's not good for her party. That's not good for her agenda. So she's not going to do it. Like, you're asking something of someone for whom it's diametrically opposed to their entire, their whole portfolio.
So there was a New York, this was sort of going around this week. New York Magazine had a profile of Epstein that was published in 2002 that is certainly interesting to read now. It begins by writing here, this is by Landon Thomas Jr., and the headline is Jeffrey Epstein, International Money Man of Mystery. He comes with cash to burn, a fleet of airplanes, and a keen eye for the ladies, to say nothing of a relentless brain that challenges Nobel Prize-winning scientists across the country and for financial markets around the world. Ever since the Post's Page 6 ran an item about the president's late September visit to Africa with Kevin Spacey and Chris Tucker on his benefactor's customized Boeing 727, the question of the day has been, who in the world is Jeffrey Epstein? It goes on to talk about... quoting someone here, it says, my belief is that Jeff maintains some sort of money management firm, though you won't get a straight answer from him, says one well-known investor. He once told me he had 300 people working for him, and I've also heard he manages Rockefeller money, but no one ever knows. It's like looking at the Wizard of Oz. There may be less there than meets the eye. Here's Clinton speaking of Epstein. He goes, Jeffrey is both a highly successful financier and a committed philanthropist with a keen sense of global markets and an in-depth knowledge of 21st century science, Clinton says through a spokesman. I especially appreciated his insights and generosity during the recent trip to Africa to work on democratization, empowering the poor, citizen service, and combating HIV/AIDS. So Clinton, of course, Bill Clinton has now released a statement saying that he knew nothing of these ghastly crimes and has only been on, quote, 4 trips on Jeffrey Epstein's planes, which, of course, refers to an itinerary that covers way more than just 4 appearances on that airplane. So, again, like, think about how close the Clintons are to this guy, and then also how close Trump is, as we've mentioned on our last show. There was a lawsuit that alleged that Trump raped a 13-year-old girl in Jeffrey Epstein's apartment that was dropped under, again, very suspicious circumstances. We know Trump's famous quote that he gave in this article about Jeffrey Epstein, where he said, we all know Jeffrey loves his social life. He loves girls, many on the young side.
Epstein was asked in a deposition if he'd ever attended a party with Trump and underage girls, and he pled the fifth.
I mean, again, hard to know where to go with all of this, but I just keep coming back to the movie Chinatown and John Huston's Noah Cross character in that movie as just like a kind of singular portrayal of American evil and depravity, that what comes with money and power is just like not just the will, but like the means to do anything for which there is like, no limits to you whatsoever.
Why are you doing it? How much better can you eat? What can you buy that you can't already afford?
The future, Mr. Gitz. The future. Now, where's the girl? I want the only daughter I've got left. As you found out, Evelyn was lost to me a long time ago.
Who do you blame for that, her?
I don't blame myself. See, Mr. Gitz, most people never have to face the fact that at the right time and the right place, they're capable of anything.
Well, when I think about limits, I think, is there anything outside this system? I mean, we get a lot of talk about how media can suddenly explode somebody who's been getting away with this for a long time. I mean, in theory, it would take one leak of one video from that island, right, with a few famous faces on it. But there doesn't seem to be anybody with the will or the means to leak that video.
Well, in the past week, also, we've had people basically say that, I was at Vanity Fair or New York Magazine. And it was Vicky Ward, I think, at Vanity Fair, who said that, she did a profile of Epstein that included, allegations from some of his now accusers that Graydon Carter axed at the last minute because he got, worried for whatever reason, or there have been other profiles of which these accusations were all out there, but essentially the editors all got cold feet because it couldn't quite pass the fact checking process.
Well,
they're worried about getting sued, or getting too far out in front of something. So all this was basically known by a lot of the people in the media.
But a guy like Graydon Carter, he's a satellite for New York money, right? He's just this parasite. He offers no value. Anybody could be in charge of these dumb, glossy magazines. Discretion is part of his actual what he offers to these people. Yeah. And the moment he doesn't offer that anymore, he ceases to be useful at all. And so he's out the door.
And yet something happened in Florida, right? I mean, I'm the voice of the ignorant masses here because I have a very vague memory of all this, but something happened in Florida that was an actual legal proceeding that got him the ultimate slap on the wrist. Like, you have to show up for 8 hours a day because you did something with underage girls.
It was a solicitation charge in Florida, and that's what he served his 13 months of work release.
It's a classic case where it's like ground level police work. I think some of the victims came forward to local law enforcement. They interviewed Epstein. They got a search warrant. They went to the house. They found a ton of incriminating stuff, including, if I remember correctly, one of the high school report cards of one of the girls in his house. And then it got, kicked up to the state level, and then the feds got involved. And then it was this classic thing where you have pressure from below at the local level for a conviction, and then all of a sudden this pressure from above, from the federal level, to just shelve it.
And not only that, but after he had served his quote-unquote time, mostly in New York in his office, and he returned to New York again to just basically start again doing what he's been doing the last 20, 30 years, the Manhattan DA, Cy Vance, explicitly went against the recommendations of the prosecutors in the case that he be designated a level 3 sex offender, which is the highest possible level you can be, which basically marks you as a danger to a clear and present danger to others around you. Cy Vance went out of his way to make sure he got the level 1 designation, which is the softest one.
I think he might have ended up getting the level 3 anyway, but I do know that the Cy Vance tried his hardest to intervene to get him to be a 1. Either way, it's a sign that, we know this, that the Manhattan DA's office is just a concierge service for Manhattan's richest scumbags.
Again, if the Trump years are showing us anything, it's that the mask is completely fallen off.
Yep.
Those in power and those who serve them, and that there seems to be a desperate fight to put it back on from many of the people who have been assuring those of us on the left or with any progressive values that they're the ones who've been saying for years, politics is really just all about power. You don't understand that. You're an idealist. You'll never really get, what we do here. And now that everyone essentially realizes that, these are the people that are trying the hardest to put the mask back on. Again, it's just I don't quite know where this goes. It's hard to imagine there being some sort of huge revelation where everything comes tumbling down. I think we're only going to still be getting sort of keyhole view of what's going on, but the outlines of what is now public record about who this guy is, what he did, and his associations with, like I said, the leaders of the Democratic and Republican parties, including the president. It should be enough. I don't know.
It's very bipartisan. That seems clear.
Yeah,
that's supposed to be a good thing.
Yeah. Who says the two parties can't work together anymore?
Yeah, and it's yet another nail number 2,753,000,000 in the coffin of it's just Trump. And we had a nice functioning system here until the evil Trump.
Or the idea that Trump is being manipulated, by the Russians because they have all this compromat on him. Well, if they got it on him, they got it on literally everybody else in the American ruling class. So, I don't know. Take that as cold comfort.
Speaking of compromat, there might maybe we want to cut this, but I'm hearing that there might be a Mossad connection with Epstein.
Well, we know there was a Mossad connection with Harvey Weinstein.
Well, yes, because he hired but that was like this weird, Black Cube.
The Black Cube, ex-Mossad, like private intelligence agency.
Yeah, but it would be in the interest of like state actors to be involved in something like this for their own purposes.
Oh, in terms of the blackmail stuff?
Yeah, that part at least.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, American public opinion on, Israel is at the lowest it's ever been. So you think the planners and, people in charge of the Israeli intelligence and military apparatus would want to, pull any cards that they have to, stay in the good graces of the United States government?
Yeah.
I mean, again, they probably wouldn't have to work that hard because there's a big difference in public opinion and, the people.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Public opinion is the real issue here. Is that even a thing anymore?
I don't think it is with Trump, especially with Compromat, because one of the whole post-2016 Hillary demographic meltdown was frightening in its stupidity. And one of the ways in which it was frightening is, why are you trying Compromat on Trump? His people don't want him to be a good person. They don't think he's a good person. He is their revenge.
Yeah.
He is their golem. They want him to embarrass the people who were maintaining this facade of decency on a system they knew was not decent. So to the extent that Compromat is going to work on anybody, it's going to work on Bill a lot harder than it worked on Trump.
Because he has, like the Clinton Foundation, that he is in his post-presidential life, coming out of a presidency, already tarnished by, sexual misdeeds, at least of what we know of the, non-illegal variety. That he's become a global spokesman for, like you said, the flight he took to Africa with Kevin Spacey and Chris Tucker of all people. What's up? But
someone told me that's not the same Chris Tucker. I don't know.
It's not the Rush Hour and
it's not
Friday?
Rush Hour Chris Tucker.
Okay, but I mean, it's Kevin Spacey and Bill Clinton
for sure
went to Africa together. Like what he said, that Jeffrey Epstein's a philanthropist, and he is someone who needs to be seen as a good person who is doing the right things at all times. So yeah, you're right. He'd be I mean, look, if Russian state actors have Compromat on Trump, you can fucking rest assured they have it on Bill Clinton too.
Oh yeah.
So,
but I mean, we might be entering the age when it doesn't matter anymore. Things happen too fast, and now no one really trusts anything they hear if it doesn't align with their preconceived notions anyway, because you can always make some sort of argument that it's fake. So information no longer has a probative value. There's only pre-existing opinions that people then grab out of the stream of information, the stuff that supports it, and then they think that's true, and the stuff that doesn't is fake. Like if these videos came out, who's going to be able to prove to the satisfaction of an invested party that they're real, that they're not deep fakes or something? Who's going to do it?
Hard to say. I mean, I guess I remain fascinated by this case.
Oh God,
because
I'm feeling like Nick Mullen right now.
Because it is like an Elroy novel. It's just like it's no longer fiction. We no longer have to live in a world where it's like fiction is what hints at the extreme evil and depravity of like the ruling class.
Well, this moment we're in, this moment that feels so vertiginous and alienating, it's because fiction has been outpaced and can't keep up. Like you can't keep up with what's happening. No representation can allegorically reflect like the hidden texture of reality, because there's no hidden texture of reality. There's just what is, and our collective incapacity to deal with it, to do anything about it.
And there's a sliding scale of morality among the fans of the various actors, in that the same people who, because I do troll comment section, I do want to know what the hidden norm thinks, and the hidden norm is insane and vindictive, just to give you the quick version. The hidden norm thinks it's fine that Trump has been stiffing contractors and groping everything that moves all his life. In fact, the hidden norm thinks that's great. But the hidden norm thinks the fact that Bernie Sanders might have made money off a book and might have bought a second vacation house is appalling. So that's part of the problem with the Compromat. You're not dealing with some scale that works across the board. It's to your advantage to declare yourself an utter sleaze in the beginning.
Or like with the Sanders thing is a perfect example. Like the sliding scale. Like if you get mad at Hillary raking in hundreds of thousands of dollars giving speeches to Goldman Sachs, like you're just a hater. But then it turns out, like according to his tax returns, Bernie made like $1 million off his book. I mean, well, then he's an awful hypocrite. He's evil. He's just as bad as Goldman Sachs. And I got to say, I'm self-interested party here. You can take this with a huge grain of salt. But, making money off a book you write is probably one of the least exploitative ways you can become rich. I don't know. I mean,
one of the hardest ways to make money.
Yeah.
Speaking of perverts.
Yeah, this is a good segue. Matt has just this morning, has done some on-the-ground shoe leather legal reporting on an issue of note. Matt, would you like to explain?
This morning at Superior Court, the Southern District of Manhattan, of New York, they were doing Jeffrey Epstein's bail hearing.
This is the place where all the Law & Order episodes are filmed.
No, it's around the corner from that, because this is the federal court, not the state court.
No, this is where they film the episodes, the studio.
Oh. Well, I don't know. All I know is the steps that they're always walking down to get a hot dog, that's like a half a block away. That's not here. And I couldn't get into the building. Maybe if I was more of an intrepid journalist, I could have, but I don't know how to do that. The doors seem to be not allowed unless you.
Did you try opening the handle?
Well, no, they were all being guarded by police. One said it was for employees only. One said it was for court and reporters only. And I don't have any kind of press credentials, so I don't think I would have been allowed in.
You should have kept your lanyard from Netroots Nation.
That might have helped. I think that they had probably a smart idea that you don't want a bunch of yahoos showing up at the Epstein hearing. So instead, I hung out with the press people outside, waiting for the news that Jeffrey Epstein's bail was denied, that he will remain in custody, which will make it harder for him to, quote unquote, commit suicide sometime in the next 6 months. But
wouldn't it be easier for him for that to happen?
I don't know. It's just like there's more to answer to if he happens.
Yeah, you're right.
In his cell, as opposed to
What
out
if
on
he just gets
boat.
like shanked like 50 times?
Yeah,
in Gen Pop or whatever.
Yeah, Breaking Bad style.
Yeah.
All I know is that Jerlina Maxwell's dad just fell off of his yacht, and that would have been an easier thing for them to do if he had decided to go on the lam or something. But yeah, so I hung out in front with the jaded media reporters, and it was funny. So I was standing across the street, and then a truck pulls up, like a one of the workman's trucks. I don't know, filled with items for sale, or I don't know. And a guy in the seat goes, "Hey, whose case is this? What's going on?" And I go, "It's Epstein." And he goes, "Huh?" I go, "The pedophile." And he goes, "Oh, what's going on?" I go, "It's his bail hearing." He's like, "Oh, shit." So some people are aware, I think, of what's going on, even if they don't know the particulars.
The trial of the century.
Hey, I'm knowing about pedophiles over here.
Yeah. Hey, check out that friggin' temple on the island. Hey. So we just hung around, and then the only people who came out to do a press conference were the lawyers for the victims. So not anybody from the defense team or from the U.S. Prosecutors came out. And it was very short and kind of, frankly, anticlimactic. The only thing I could really take from it is, one, Q people are fucking loser lamos, because there wasn't a single person there in a Q hat or a Q paraphernalia, no Pizzagate people, no one dedicated to this showed up. I fucking showed up, and you assholes couldn't do this. You've been on the fucking forums for how long? You're waving your signs at Trump, and you can't show up just to see what's going on? Pathetic. Part-timers.
Hyper trendies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have no time for any of them.
So Epstein denied bail. According to the judge, it was a big part of that was the testimony of several of his victims at the bail hearing. That and probably the, $700,000 in cash and foreign passports that the FBI found in a safe in his house.
Yeah. So he was Saudi Arabian the whole time.
That and the fact
okay,
that
by the way, the best joke about that was someone said, like, damn, Saudi Arabia really likes sponsoring controversial flights in America.
All that, plus the fact that the last time he was quote unquote in custody during his penalty, he was allowed, like, women were allowed access to him in custody. They would just sign in and they would get to go in. Amazing.
Didn't he also have loose diamonds?
He had loose diamonds, yes, which are very good for transporting value across borders easily.
And sometimes you just lose track of your diamonds.
In your couch cushions and whatnot.
No, the one thing they took away from it is that the people who came out to talk were associates from David Boyce's law firm, who have been the people keeping this flame going after Epstein's criminal conviction because they've been pursuing civil litigation on behalf of the victims. And David Boies is an incredibly powerful figure. He argued for Gore in the Bush v. Gore case. He argued for the state in the Microsoft antitrust case. And he was Harvey Weinstein's attorney, who was the attorney who acquired the ex-Mossad investigative firm Black Cube to harass Weinstein accusers. So basically, if anybody is going to be implicated in a really high-end pedophile ring, he would be as much likely to as a guy like Dershowitz, who's been at war with over this case for years. Dershowitz has tried to get him disbarred because of that. And that makes me think that one of two things is happening. One, this really isn't the giant pedophile conspiracy that people are kind of imagining it to be. It really is sort of a limited group of sickos. Or this is what Richard Nixon used to call a limited hangout, where the degree, sort of the profligate degree of Epstein's criminality is too much to endure long-term with the public eye. And so the last few years, especially since Epstein finished his sentence, have been around cutting loose ends so that they could put him to bed, basically, and not have to worry about anything else getting revealed by more investigative rigor being put onto him. So that's kind of what I'm thinking now, that this whole thing is basically a stitch-up designed to prevent anybody from finding the full extent to which it goes.
Well, here's one place that's already led, and I'd like to share with you now. Obviously, like outside of Donald Trump and Bill Clinton, Alan Dershowitz is probably the biggest name that's been connected to all this, and Dershowitz is doing so good right now that he's pitched an article about himself to Newsmax.com, which is a website I didn't even know existed anymore. Like, if you go to the Newsmax website, it really looks like the internet circa 2002 or something like that. Like, it's very, very, it has a retro feel to it. Dershowitz just published something in Newsmax that's intended to head off a big piece that the New Yorker is working on about him. And it's called like New Yorker, J'accuse or something like that. And it's just basically him saying like, David Remnick has it out for me personally because I defend Israel. And
David Remnick, a regular Abu Nadal. That guy. There's nothing New Yorker magazine is known for more than its rigorous defense of Palestinian rights.
Yeah,
Fuck
exactly. So Dershowitz is doing great. He wants everyone to know he's fine and not at all concerned about where this case might be leading.
He's actually laughing.
Yeah. The other guy who's also doing great and wants everyone to know that like he's not bothered at all is Steven Pinker. And I sort of got like if nothing else comes out of this case but ruining his reputation,
that would be awesome.
I'll take it. Because he has played Dr. Pangloss for like the worst people alive, like as long as he's been a public intellectual. Yeah. Like he's one of the biggest frauds that's been like coasting on this reputation of being a genius who basically only flatters the incredibly wealthy and powerful.
Yeah. No, he's a court intellectual. I saw him at OzzyFest last year. We were there. Last year, and the whole pitch was, there's an app for everything. Don't worry about anything. Everything will be fine. The powerful and the wealthy, they all are dedicated to using technology to make everything better. There's no need to fix anything. Leave it to the professionals.
And I think we said at the time, because our third eye was just being, sort of pried open, that as he was talking, we saw the sort of Donnie Darko like tunnel come out of his chest and lead directly onto Epstein's plane.
Yep.
So he's come out with because look, there are like there's this picture that everyone's been circulating of him, Lawrence Krauss, another one of these like public intellectuals who, if you go to their Wikipedia page, there's just a subhead that says allegations.
Yeah.
Who and then like a big subplot of the Epstein thing is like how connected he is through funding and personal relationships and networking to like the highest levels of academia, and the way he sort of collected prominent scientists and what he regarded as cutting edge thinkers. Steven Pinker, being among them. And there's a picture of him and Lawrence Krauss smiling and sitting at a table with Jeffrey Epstein that was taken in 2014. Now, that is a full 7 years after he was originally convicted of solicitation in Florida. And no, he was convicted of, the minor charge of solicitation.
Yeah.
But, like, the accusations were all there.
Everyone knew that shit.
Everybody knew that shit by then. And it was posted on the Facebook. It's all since been scrubbed. but it was posted on the Facebook page of the Jeffrey Epstein Foundation. And this is clearly at a gala dinner of something he sponsored called it's called like the Origin Society at ASU, of which Pinker is also associated with. So like through his funding of all of these various philanthropic endeavors, Pinker is like, oh, I was in the same circles with him, and I ended up in this one photograph with him. And but I'm saying like the context was you were still attending a dinner sponsored by his money for a program that you're in 2014. To which, like, nobody has ever explained why in 2014 anyone
how is he not a
would
pariah?
be in the same fucking room with this guy.
How is he not a permanent pariah after that? That's the question.
It'd be almost impossible to plead ignorance to the fact of what he was accused of, which is, let's be honest, pimping teenage girls and sexually abusing them.
Yes.
And, so either you are actively complicit in those crimes or just cynically willing to take the money of a serial rapist and have your photo taken with the glad handing with him in exchange for his funding.
Either way, it's a bad look.
Here's what Pinker has finally taken to the internet to address these, allegations, and by allegations I mean photos of him and his name on those flight logs. He has chosen to post this at the blog Why Evolution is True.
Okay, I'm gonna need a fact check on this.
So let's begin here. He says, "I'm happy to share my encounters with Epstein." This is Pinker writing here. This is Pinker emailed the proprietor of Why Evolution is True. Again, we're waiting for how many pants on fire that statement has. But he goes, the annoying irony is that I could never stand the guy, never took research funding from him, and always tried to keep my distance. Friends and colleagues described him to me as a quantitative genius and a scientific sophisticate, and they invited me to salons and coffee klatches at which he held court. But I found him to be a kibitzer and a dilettante. He would abruptly change the subject, ADD style, dismiss an observation with an adolescent wisecrack, and privilege his own intuitions over systematic data. I think the dislike was mutual. According to a friend, he, quote, voted me off the island, presumably because he was sick of me trying to keep the conversation on track and correcting him when he shot off his mouth on topics he knew nothing about.
Maybe not the best time to use that metaphor.
I think he means literally, but here's the thing though. He's trying to say I never liked the guy and always tried to keep him at arm's length. But the very first sort of evidence of that Pinker's giving here seems to imply that that was the opposite, that Epstein was actually trying to keep him at distance.
Yeah.
I was trying to separate.
It's like I was hanging out with him and we were doing great.
I kept coming to his house and coffee klatches, but he never liked me.
He wouldn't let me back in.
And then
he was a jerk know-it-all. Really? That was the big problem with Epstein? He wasn't rigorous enough in his scientific thinking? That was the thing that made him bad? Interesting.
Right, sounds like a fake friend.
So he goes here, but Epstein had insinuated himself with so many people I intersected with, Alan Dershowitz, Martin Nowak, John Brockman, Steve Koslin, Lawrence Krauss. I'm sure all those guys are glad you're bringing them up as well here. So I was just like...
Shut up. No, don't stop.
So he goes here, and so many institutions he helped fund. Harvard's program in evolutionary dynamics, ASU's Origins Project, and even Harvard Hillel. Again, he started out by saying, I never took research funding from him. But all the organizations that I'm a fellow and a member of definitely did take money from him. So he goes, that I often ended up at the same place with him. Most of these gatherings were prior to the revelation of his sex crimes, such as at the 2002 plane trip to the TED Talk with Dawkins, Dennett, Brockmans, and others. But Krauss's Origins Projects meetings came after he served his sentence. So, yeah, again, the picture everyone's talking about was in 2014.
Yeah.
A full 7 years after he was convicted of solicitation.
Yeah.
Since I was often the most recognizable person in the room. Oh, thanks, Steve. These clout sharks.
Stupid haircut.
Yeah. Since I was often the most recognizable person in the room, someone would snap a picture. Some of them resurfaced this past week, circulated by people who disagree with me on various topics and apparently believe that photos are effective arguments. In the interests of full disclosure, there was another connection. Alan Dershowitz and I are friends and colleagues, and we taught a course together at Harvard. He often asked me questions about syntax and the semantics of laws, most recently, the impeachment statute. While he was representing Epstein, he asked me about the natural interpretation of one of the relevant laws, and I offered my opinion. This was cited in a court document. I did it as a favor to a friend and a colleague, not as a paid expert witness. But now I regret that I did so. And needless to say, I find Epstein's behavior reprehensible. So I love that he's using this to exonerate himself. And he's like, oh, no. I gave my legal advice to his defense, but I didn't do it as any type of expert witness or testimony. I just did it as a favor to a friend who's also deeply implicated in his many horrific crimes.
Also, when I say that I'm horrified by Epstein's conduct, I mean being a churl at parties. The only thing I actually care about.
Yeah, he says he has ADD, which, by the way, canceled. And then he goes on to talk about how like in all his books, he's written at length about how much he abhors the violence against and the exploitation of women. And he closes by saying, as far as I know, I'm the only writer who has documented and celebrated actual progress in reducing violence against women and argued that this progress shows that the effort is not futile and should embolden us to press for greater reduction still. The only writer. You're the only writer who's ever done that. Well, I guess you could say you're the only writer who's ever done that and been photographed smiling at the same table next to a serial rapist.
Look, I celebrate myself. I contain contrasts. What's his name?
Whitman.
Uh-oh. Never mind. Okay. That's not helping.
And then the guy who runs Why Evolution is True just says here, he closes, of course, by saying, last year I was featured in a New York Times op-ed by Jesse Singal called Social Media is Making Us Dumber. Here's Exhibit A. This year, I appear to be Exhibit B. So he's just saying, like, this is all Twitter and social media's fault. And then the guy who runs Why Evolution is True closes by saying, there you have it. If people are going to tar Pinker by flaunting his association with Epstein, then Pinker deserves a reply. This is his reply and any further discussion to take it into account. Good. I think it should be taken into account.
Yeah, it's all going on into the file.
Wait, the blog is called
Why Evolution is True.
So that's just what the whole blog is about? Just why evolution is true?
I mean, it's like I think it's all just like new atheism shit.
And the occasional defense by a guy who hangs out with a convicted pedophile.
So there you go. That's your weekly update on the Epstein case and the people surrounding it.
This is really going to be interesting, honestly. When it starts coming out what they found in the safes and stuff, the degree to which there's even going to be a possibility of implication wider. There was an article today where they're claiming people in the DA's office or the U.S. Attorney's office is claiming like huge, massive number of incredibly powerful people being implicated. I don't know. My guess is that we end up getting 2 or 3 people getting stitched up. Probably Dershowitz. Dershowitz is probably completely fucked one way or the other. But I have a feeling it's just never going to materialize. It's always going to be sort of at the edge. Just like everything else in this era. It's like it feels like we might come to a reckoning and then nope. No reckoning. We just keep pushing it off into the sunset, into nothing.
I've been thinking a lot about something Brendan said to me over the weekend, which is that like we're living in an era now where like in a couple years, like everybody is either going to be a normie or like a full-time crank. Mm-hmm. And if you're interested in politics at all, no matter what ideology or side of the political spectrum or any interest whatsoever you come from or to. You will be like a full crank.
Oh yeah,
and then everyone else will just sort of like as H.P. Lovecraft said, retreat into the bliss of our second dark age and just be watching like
Avengers Flat Brim Hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's how it's always been though. Maybe the contrast is sharper now.
I think what's going to happen though is that I think people are going to realize that to commit to having politics is going to fundamentally alienate you. You're not going to be able to dabble, I think, is what.
I mean, politics is it's in this era an affectation or a distraction. It's just something to occupy your time with, and make you into a crank who's obsessed with this sort of thing.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. We're all going to end up completely insane, and it's cool, and I can't wait just to be a gibbering maniac.
So as we slide further into Epstein-related dementia, I thought it would be a good time now to bring on 2 guests that have started their own podcast dedicated it's like basically if True Detective season 1 ran for like 30 episodes instead of just stopping before they got to the truth.
Yeah.
It would be the it would be the True Anon podcast hosted by our good friends Brace and Liz. Brace, welcome back to the show. Liz, welcome.
Thank you.
My wig has been fucking snatched by Jeffrey Epstein. It is so a crooked cop tried to murder him last night in his cell. What's it? I can't pronounce
Tagliatelle or something like that. He's a
Tartaglione.
Tartaglione, he's like the guy from Doom. He's
the Beast Ravon.
He's the Doom Marine, but Italian. So let's just get into this. This is NBC News. It says just a news account of what went down the other night. Accused pedophile and wealthy Manhattan financier Jeffrey Epstein was found injured and in a fetal position inside his cell at a New York City jail, according to sources close to the investigation. Epstein, who is being held in Metropolitan Correctional Center as he awaits his trial for conspiracy and sex trafficking, was found semi-conscious with marks on his neck, two sources told News 4. Investigators are trying to piece together exactly what happened, saying details remain murky. Two sources tell News 4 that Epstein may have tried to hang himself, while a third source cautioned that the injuries were not serious and questioned if Epstein might be using it as a way to get a transfer. A fourth source said that an assault had not been ruled out and that another inmate was questioned. The inmate who investigators have talked to in Lower Manhattan facility has been identified as Nicholas Tartaglione, according to two sources. Tartaglione is a former police officer in Westchester County who was arrested in December 2016 and accused of killing 4 men in an alleged cocaine distribution conspiracy, then burying their bodies in his yard in Otisville, Orange County, according to court records.
I just want to add a Mueller report style footnote here. The place he killed these 4 men at was called the Liquid Lounge. That is LICKQIED. QID.
God,
it's probably the Likud Lounge, actually.
Well, I mean, he was actually doing some very smart admiralty law. If you kill somebody in a place that's spelled incorrectly, the murder is invalid. The murder conviction is invalid. So free this man, you know?
So I feel like before we can even get into... Okay, so there's a strong chance that they... who they are, I don't know. The fact that they bungled this hit makes me think it was the Clintons involved in this.
Yeah, Robbie
Mook tried to set up this hit.
Yeah. I just imagine Hillary sneaking up behind him and she's garroting him, but then she has a Kurdu attack halfway through and starts coughing and falls down.
It's those damn vapors again.
It's like the college episode of The Sopranos. The thing about us wise guys is the hustle never ends. You drop the files on my husband back there. Your life is just chilling in hell.
Let's just say his Adam's apple was Wisconsin.
But it's just like, but Brace, like it's the nature of this case that like you cannot discover one seemingly incredibly bizarre new detail about this without finding out 10 other even more bizarre things. And I feel like before we can even get into Epstein, we have to talk about Tartaglione, a crooked Orange County police officer who fucking murdered 4 cartel guys and is represented by a top mob lawyer. And check this out.
Italian last name, dude.
He looks like the Black Lodge version of Mr. Clean.
We just made fun of that QAnon asshole for killing the Gambino guy because we said, what's the mob got to do with all this shit? And now here we got a fucking mob-connected dude trying to clip Epstein 2 days later.
I like how
he got the wrong guy.
I like how fucking after like 2016, there were like some more left liberals who were like, yeah, apologies to Bernie voters. You're right. I'm joining DSA. Now we have to do the same thing with QAnon.
Yes. Well,
it'll be the new rose emoji.
I want to sort of earmark that because QAnon. We can get into this after Tartaglione. QAnon is itself a psyop from, let's just call them the cabal, to discredit what is actually happening, which is literally the same thing as QAnon, except Donald Trump's not fighting them.
I mean, one of the chief guys who started the whole Pizzagate thing is Jack Prilosek. He was literally a naval intelligence officer.
Not only that,
is melting. Oh my God.
Not only that, he is like the protege of one Roger Stone.
Yeah.
Along with Mr. Pizzagate, Mike Cernovich. These people pushed, Posobiec really pushed Pizzagate and QAnon. Cernovich mostly stuck to Pizzagate, but they pushed them hard. And they added all this sort of noise. I mean, also Posobiec was behind the Seth Rich stuff, which added just like noise to all of this. and made sort of the idea of the Clintons murdering the Clinton crime family kind of discredited.
Well, before we get into all these sort of like double blinds and controlled oppositions and false flag conspiracies, there's just two other incredible details about Nicholas Tartaglione, the person of interest who may have tried to suicide Jeffrey Epstein in the middle of like hot, like solitary
secure housing unit.
So it says here, when you Google his name, you get a story about this. Illicit phone found in cell of ex-cop charged in quadruple homicide. Nicholas Tartaglione, 51, a former Briarcliff Manor police officer who lived on Old Mountain. He lived on the Old Town Road near Otisville.
Oh, dude, he's hopping on that remix. Lil Nas X. Yo, we got Jeffrey Epstein on the new remix. of Old Town Road.
He faces 17 counts, including 4 counts of murder in furtherance of a narcotics conspiracy. Federal prosecutors are seeking the death penalty.
Okay? Yes.
This guy's facing the death penalty. So check this out. According to a letter prosecutors filed on Monday, correction staff at the New York Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan saw Tartaglione holding a mini cellular phone in his hand on July 3rd while in his cell. Okay, why is the date July 3rd important? July 3rd happens to be the same day as when a panel of judges with the Second Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that some 2,000 pages of the Epstein case files had to be unsealed. And now a guy who does hits for the mob, who's a former cop facing the death penalty in the same holding center as Jeffrey Epstein, ends up with a contraband cell phone on the same day, or was caught with it at least the same day that happened. Second,
yes.
I mean, maybe not as like dramatic to the conspiracy angle to this, but Tartaglione was also involved in the assault of a man named Clay Tiffany, who is known as a longtime Ossining gadfly, who hosted a public access show where he railed against the Briarcliff police force called, I shit you not, Dirge for the Charlatans, who won a $1.1 million settlement from Briarcliff Village after claiming that former officer Nicholas Tartaglione assaulted him.
See, how are you not supposed to go insane? Because if I lived in that town,
what does God want me to do with this information?
If I lived in that town and there's a cranky weirdo who looks like Steve Brule on my TV on public access on his show, the Dirge of the What's?
Dirge of the Charlatans.
Dirge of the Charlatans, talking about the corrupt cops who keep harassing him and beating him up, just for wearing his sandwich boards out in the public. I would just write him off as a crank. And then once he died, I would say, well, he's an old man. He probably died of natural causes. Then, oh no, the cop that he named personally as someone who was
and won $1 million from
killed 4 people and buried them in his yard, and then ended up in the cell with Epstein, maybe fucking trying to kill him.
So check this out.
They successfully located America's dumbest crooked cop. He didn't even leave his house to bury the bodies. He's so fucking lazy. Like there was a special forces unit of the Chicago Police Department that was like, they were doing the SHIELD shit. Yeah. Like they would raid drug dealers and then like secretly sell them, and it took them years to catch them. And in upstate New York, I guess just no one gives a shit. Just no work ethic.
He got caught by his neighbor who just saw him burying the body.
There was a foot sticking out of the ground. This lazy fucking moron.
He left a hand sticking out as like a Halloween decoration. He was like,
"Whoa, I'm doing a fucking spooky solstice event.
It's for the kids."
He's like
fucking solstice.
He's like
fucking. My girlfriend loves solstice shit. It's fucking.
He's like fucking Peter Stormare in Fargo. But check this out. It's just a little bit more about Clay Tiffany. It said here, Tiffany used his public access show to rail against the village of Briarcliff Manor and was a regular fixture at village board and board of education meetings. He may have been dead for up to 2 weeks when police found him at his Ossining home on March 26 after someone asked for a welfare check. He died of natural causes.
I'm sure he did.
I mean, Italian excellence is like just killing rude Yelp reviewers. That's the equivalent here. It's the exact same thing.
It's just, I mean, you can say that's silly, but at this point, I don't know what to do with the fact that I was there in front of the Manhattan U.S. courthouse on last week when during the arraignment or during the bail hearing, they say no bail for Epstein. And my just thought is, well, what now? There's 2 ways this plays out. If there's nothing behind this, then you have a regular old legal procedure, and everything gets out, and we see, and maybe some rich people get in trouble, maybe some documents come out, maybe some incriminating video is released, but it would all take a natural course. If this isn't the case, then there's no way this can go to trial by the nature of who is implicated by it, which means something has to happen to Epstein. Like, it's just a mathematical fact. Something has to happen to him. And then less than a fucking week later, the motherfucker is on the ground in a fucking suicide attempt. What are you supposed to do with this?
So the thing is, even if it does go to trial, the fucking lawyer is Boys.
That's true, which is that's been what's fucking with me, is that if there's anybody who's like wired into this shit, it would be him.
Here's the thing: I am friends with literally no one in Mossad, right?
Likely story, dude.
I mean, I had an internship like anyone else, but I've
like,
sort of fallen out of contact with those friends.
Boys did used to get a lot of good, like, the 90s. People loved reading news stories about lawyers for some reason.
What a terrible time.
I know, God. But now, like, we just have to read about lawyers again, except now they're bad. I just don't give a fuck. But, yeah, Boys is, like, kind of in the gutter now. And I think he is trying to redeem his reputation. But I also, like, am 30% I'll go up to 50%. Pretty sure that he's just controlled opposition in this. He is the sort of fail-safe of all the Epstein, the Clinton crime family bungles something once again. Boys is there to fuck up the case totally, get Epstein whatever life in prison, but make sure none of the shit really gets out.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I think too. Because like, what's weird is that some of the other kind of like tangential figures in this like very vast worldwide conspiracy, Adnan Khashoggi and Robert Maxwell, both who were both like obviously CIA assets. Both died like basically penniless
and
like,
disgraced,
total ruin, disgraced. Both very strange deaths, and I kind of feel like that's what's happening with our friend Jeffrey. Like he's the fall guy to kind of like move it along, but keep everything in place.
Like the Alfred to his Batman. Ghislaine Maxwell. I cannot pronounce it. Ghislaine.
It's Ghislaine, but it sounds better to say Ghislaine.
That is great OPSEC by Robert Maxwell, giving his daughter that fucking made-up ass name that I can't say.
Totally unpronounceable name. Yeah.
Who, by the way, she was at Chelsea Clinton's wedding as well.
Oh, absolutely, dude.
She's like at every event ever.
Check this fucking factoid out. Robert Maxwell was thrown off a boat called the Lady Ghislaine. The boat that fucking Epstein uses, the yacht that he uses, is also called Lady Ghislaine.
And
maybe he's thrifty.
And wasn't that Lady Ghislaine the one that Maxwell, quote unquote, fell off of? Didn't Trump buy that one?
Yes, from fucking Adnan Khashoggi.
Do these people know? Maybe the problem is just like these people don't have enough friends. It's just like the same four people.
Honestly, like this is how abusive relationships. When like your circle just gets super, super like insular and everybody kind of starts fighting with each other and they don't know who to turn outside for help.
Yeah.
Maybe if they had all just started a podcast, the sex ring wouldn't have happened.
Exactly.
Or like Donald Trump should have cut these toxic people out of his life.
I mean, he did. And like, he honestly, like he did cut these people out. And, like look what happened to him, dude. Like he achieved like, honestly, like amazing things.
Yeah. Great shit, man. That was dope.
I want to get back to Ghislaine Maxwell and her father, Robert Maxwell, and his mysterious death as well. But before that, we'll go back to Boys for a second. Another interesting, plot line in this conspiracy is the rivalry between David Boies and Alan Dershowitz, which contributed to one of my absolute favorite TV clips of recent vintage, which was Dershowitz going on Fox News to claim that I have, quote, a perfect normal sex life.
I have never gone past the tip in 30 years.
So he said here, he said on Fox News, look, I've had sex with one woman since the day I met Jeffrey Epstein. I challenged David Boies to say under oath that he has only had sex with one woman during that period of time. He goes, he couldn't do it. So he has an enormous amount of chutzpah to challenge me and to challenge my perfect sex life during the relevant period of time.
Here's the thing. He does the whole Clinton thing where he says he's only had sex with one woman during that time.
Oh, shit.
Oh, fuck.
Oh, my God.
That's
why he makes the big bucks.
That's why he's the best.
He's fucking winking at us with that. Robert, the Dershowitz thing is insane. I have a feeling they're willing to cut Dershowitz loose too.
I think he's fucked.
Yeah, I mean, he's old. He's probably not as sharp as he used to be. He's what, like 81?
I just don't think he's. Yeah. I just think he's of no use to these people, and he's completely like out for himself to salvage his own reputation and freedom at this point. Yeah. But I think he's been like he can only publish articles in Newsmax and go on Laura Ingram's show. Yes. Like he's been cut off from like his real sponsors.
Yeah, he wants to he's desperate. He wants to be in the New York Times again, writing like another article about like why Cinnabon's anti-Semitic because an Arab works there or something. But he's not going to get it. But he'll do anything.
Yeah, it's like all those articles about him getting kicked off Martha's Vineyard or whatever. And like, let's be clear, Martha's Vineyard is like fucking Wicker Man, Midsummer. I didn't see Midsummer.
Absolutely, it's one of the most satanic places on earth.
It is seriously. It is a nexus of dark energy and evil spirits. And they cast Dershowitz out, and that was the fact that the New York Times, which obviously is controlled by the deep state as well, published that and like hammered that point home. That is like a flare that only people with eyes that like are attuned to the kinds of light that only pedophiles can see. So,
okay, well, I guess like this is. I mean, like there's so many threads here, but like they all essentially lead through the same basic question that I have about this and what is becoming so fascinating about this whole Epstein conspiracy, which is basically this: is Jeffrey Epstein and everything surrounding this case, was he an asset of one or several intelligence agencies? Because it's very hard for me to given what we know about the fact that he more or less openly operated as a pimp and blackmailer in the procurement of underage women for the rich and powerful, more or less openly for decades. And that not only that, he also
yes.
more or less operated a completely fraudulent hedge fund, which again, everybody knew was not actually a hedge fund. And he just for some reason had billions of dollars just given to him by incredibly wealthy people with no discernible evidence that he was like doing anything with their money.
And not just given billions of dollars. People like Les Wexner gave him power of attorney. That's unheard of. Yeah. That's fucking insane.
No one does that.
Oh, and his entire pedigree to that point had been unqualified math teacher at the Dalton School, unqualified quant at Bear Stearns, a guy who'd been caught up in a fucking Ponzi scheme. That was what he was coming off of when Les Wexner just gave him a mansion, power of attorney, and like $500 million to start a hedge fund.
Well, before that year, Jeffrey Epstein said, "New year, new me," and he was right. He was like, this is my year.
But I was saying, what other explanation could possibly account for this? And like, if so, if we take that like as granted, like, what does this begin? Like, what does the shape of this story begin to look like?
Well, I think it's like very clear that he is like when Acosta was negotiating the federal immunity deal, in the early charges that he faced in Florida, where he got like federal immunity from just potential charges, which is like totally unheard of. Acosta's on record saying that he was told he belonged to agencies and it was above his pay grade.
Yeah, he told that to the Trump transition team.
Yes. Basically, Epstein is a pedophile indigo child. Like he is insane. Like I just want to put some things in perspective here. The man who hired him at the Dalton School, which I myself am a graduate from.
You and Matt Iglesias?
Yes. Is Iglesias really a graduate?
Yeah. Yep.
Brayson,
he's involved. He's got to be involved.
Brayson Iglesias would like just spit ciphers in the Dalton parking lot. Give anything to go back to those days.
Felix, there's no parking lot. Come on, dude. It's Manhattan.
So the guy who hired him,
okay, fine.
Donald Barr, was an agent of the OSS in World War II. The OSS, as the virginal Chapo World War II nerd listeners will realize, is the precursor to the CIA, the Office of Strategic Services. So he got hired just out of nowhere by an OSS man. He gets hired by Greenberg, this guy Alan Greenberg at Bear Stearns. Alan Greenberg, I just want to make note here, was really good friends with Roy Cohn,
who also very well might have had a fucking blackmail ring among wealthy people in New York.
Also,
And was also McCarthy's lawyer way back in the day.
Alan Greenberg.
And was a Bob lawyer.
Alan Greenberg was also the chairman of AIG and was forced out before AIG completely collapsed. He was a gigantic player in the insurance industry.
Roy Cohn was also Donald Trump's mentor in the 80s.
Also true, yes.
The thing is like, he's also like, there is a picture that just came out of Epstein and Clinton sort of like looking very relaxed, sort of leaning towards each other across the table.
It looks like they're about to record a podcast.
Well, someone else posted a picture of the inside of the Lolita Express, and it is the same. It's the same place.
Yeah, no, it's the point.
It is almost certain that picture was taken, or people are pretty certain that picture was taken, like when they were visiting the fucking Sultan of Brunei, who is like probably the most noble of the CIA agents out there. But like it
is. Here's another, again, unfucking believable just digression to this story. William Barr, the Attorney General's father, who gave Jeffrey Epstein his first teaching job.
Unqualified for. He was not a college graduate.
He had a high school education at that point. He gave him a job teaching math at a prestigious New York City private school. In addition to being an OSS agent, Donald Barr was a wannabe science fiction writer who wrote a book, the plot of which was that the main character is kidnapped by a race of ultra-rich, decadent aliens as a sex slave to take part in their weird rituals. And in the jacket copy for the book, it says that the alien race that owns the sex slaves do it because they were, quote, so bored with their wealth and power that they needed new heights of decadence to entertain their otherworldly lusts with.
Okay, there's an innocent explanation for all this. All these people are introverts and can't leave their circle. It takes a lot of energy for them.
Takes a lot of spoons.
Yeah.
Honestly, I get why he had to write that as like they were, let's say, cosmopolitan aliens.
But the thing about Epstein is that he was not qualified for any of the jobs he ever had. And the gloss on it was, well, he's a math genius. But there's no record of him ever showing any genius or aptitude to anything in his entire life. Which just if he was like doing cover for the thing he would want to do just to be more convincing. You'd have like an algorithm or something. The only thing he showed any aptitude for was being a pedophile. Which means that, he's like an indigo child. He's like the world's greatest pedophile. Well, and they literally it's like when they find the new Dalai Lama, they put like the implements in front of him and they see which one they pick out. It's like he picked out a fucking flight log or something, and then like he's the one, and they just raised him up through the ranks to be their procurer because somebody in that job has to be at a lower rank. You have to be beholden to you, or else he has an independent power source.
Well, he's the only person in the world who doesn't have imposter syndrome.
Brace and Liz, let me ask you this: like, given that that's like what we are intuiting from the broad outline to this case and the just, again, manifold and insane connections to like everyone and everything that come up in it. Like, how do you guys like imagine or conceive of Epstein's role to one or several intelligence agencies?
Okay, so how do I conceive of the connection to one or several intelligence agencies?
But like, what did he do like for them other than the obvious? Like, how did this scheme work? What did he do for them?
So going back to the whole history of American intelligence, not even talking about intelligence agencies from other countries, they have been closely linked to the mob and just to crime in general, right? So it could be that Epstein started totally on his own and just like, you worked as basically a pimp for these people and kind of like a money manager. They're kind of guy they went to. Les Wexner is the only proven guy, but then there's Leon Black and stuff. And my theory, and the theory actually I just stole from somewhere that I read, but it makes sense to me, is that he would have these parties. These people would be videotaped. They would be presented with the videotape or be, sort of implied that it existed and told the age of the girl or whatever. And then they would be asked to put money into this hedge fund. Because from what I understand, he had like no staff on the hedge fund. It was just him like putting it into like a computer program or whatever. The CIA, obviously they knew about this, man. Like, come on. But I'm guessing that they probably kind of use that as maybe a slush fund for off-the-book stuff, kind of like similar to Benco Ambrosiano during Operation Gladio. It's interesting too that like, he really consorted with a lot of politicians as well. Like they say that there's a well-known prime minister that's going to be named in these documents. People think, Matt, who did you think it was?
I think that's Barack, right?
No, dude, that's Tony Blair.
It's got to be Tony Blair.
It's Tony Blair.
Okay, I haven't seen him being mentioned, but I wouldn't be surprised, certainly.
It's allegedly going to be Tony Blair having sex with a child on videotape.
I mean, it reminds me so much of what you hear about Scientology, that it's just like cultivating like troves and troves and troves of like possible blackmail just to keep really powerful people in check for like a rainy day.
But like, wait a second, like, wouldn't this all not work? Isn't like the effectiveness of this strategy of blackmail, doesn't it also rely on the fact that like a ton of rich and powerful people, like for lack of a better word, like fucking children?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, if it's like, I bet that some drunk 65-year-old lawyer who's got $1 billion could probably be seduced by a 16-year-old without like internally telling himself that he's a pedophile.
I have I honestly don't really buy the blackmail thing.
Okay, what do you got?
I think that he provides a service. I think that he is a trusted source for stuff these guys like to do, because some of them are pervs who genuinely have these attractions. Otherwise, I think that there is a ritualistic element to this abuse that's not necessarily involves like real Moloch worship or anything, but that involves at the highest levels a communal violations of taboos and hyper-exploitation of vulnerable people to express and solidify bonds. Basically, just high-level, depraved networking.
Yeah.
And then you need to be able to do that in a comfortable, safe environment where maybe there's a CIA agent at the door who's going to make sure that like some fucking Chinese guy isn't there with a fucking USB that can just get all this stuff so that President Xi can just fucking wreck everybody's shit, tomorrow afternoon if he finds out about it. And so they're paying for the discretion. The blackmail stuff, I think, is more related to why he always involves these political figures and like the high level, like all the arts people and the scientists. It's to keep a buffer of powerful people who are vulnerable if he gets in trouble, and that means that he also protects everybody else involved in the network. And that because the thing is, if it's blackmail, they're not going to keep going to him, right? People are going to be like, don't go to fucking Epstein's island. He'll blackmail you. It's go to Epstein's island. You got to pay for it, but it's worth it. Or you got to go to Epstein's island because we're all doing this and we don't trust you unless you do it too. You're not going to be in on it unless you do it. I don't think
those two theories are mutually exclusive. I think that, traditionally in this line of business, pimps and whatnot, the blackmail and the presiding at service go hand. I'm not calling him a pimp in a cool sense, it's a pejorative. I think that these things go hand in hand. You provide the service when necessary, and then maybe sometimes when you're given a nudge by a certain handler, you might do some blackmail. I mean, obviously, it is all blackmail to begin with, like at its core, because he has the fucking video. If this was just providing a service, you would not be opening up a safe with Young Name plus allegedly Tony Blair.
No, but that's the dead man switch. That's the protection. It's not necessarily something that they're using to extract these money from these rich guys.
Oh, no, not at all. I don't think so either, but I think that provides like,
But that's why, comparing it to Scientology, I think is instructive, because it's supposedly the same thing that Scientology does in order to like keep you in the ranks and kind of keep you closed in their like, whole pyramid scheme, is that you have to go through all these levels and you like hook yourself up to these things and you tell them your deepest, darkest secrets. And then they're like, haha, we got it on you. Now you can't say shit about what we do. And it kind of like protects the group. It's like herd immunity, but for perverts.
Okay. So Matt brought up the idea that there is like a ritual element to all of this through which the bonds of people at the heights of power are consecrated and their relationships are sort of sanctified in a sick and like kind of satanic way amongst each other.
Absolutely.
Through, like the, ritual and actual brutal exploitation and cruelty towards the most vulnerable, AKA the young, children.
Yes.
So this gets into what the fuck is going on with that temple on his island?
So if you look at the temple from a bird's eye view, if you look down at the temple and you see those strange sort of like designs in the front, you know what I'm talking about? kind of on like the I don't know what you would call it, just the area in front of the temple. There's a path leading down from the end of it, from the left end of it. If you're looking down facing the barred door, and if you turn that path into like a straight black line, it spells pedo. So obviously, what's going on there? There's been sort of these drone footage, and you're able to see inside. There is what appears to be a twin bed in there with like a balled up T-shirt as a mattress and a ladder.
Just like a Brooklyn apartment.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, obviously, I believe that there is a fucking elevator that goes down to like a subterranean sex torture chamber. I can't prove that yet, but the bed itself is worrisome because all the story. I mean, it's not worrisome. I mean, it's pointing us in the right direction. But all the things that people posited about it, that it was a music room, that it was a storage shed, which is a really bizarre thing to say. No, it's a bed. And the door bars from the outside.
I don't know, Brace.
So,
I keep all of my old bicycles and clothes inside the black obelisk.
Yeah, true. And they have the fucking sundial, dude. The sundial. No, I'm sorry. No non-Wiccan human has a fucking sundial on their island. And the thing is, it's underreported. He also has an island called Big St. James Island, next to Little St. James.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's been no reporting on that I can find.
Brace, it's basically like Ilsa Nublar and Ilsa Sorna in the Jurassic Park world.
I bet he does have like DNA mutant experiments on that island of some kind.
Here's the thing, though. Like the obviously, like there's all this talk about the island. What are we going to do about the island? Is anyone on the island? It doesn't appear that anyone's on there right now. Although I'm sure there are some like fucking Morlocks down there guarding whatever secrets. But the obvious solution is that somebody goes to an island, to the island. Somebody has to go.
We'll do a fucking like a D-Day landing and just occupy that fucking island.
Exactly. Occupy Epstein.
Well, there's a pretty good DSA chapter on that island.
Yeah. Well, it's YDSA.
Oh my god!
I wonder if this episode is going to get us in trouble.
Thank God.
Dude, they haven't let us upload ours to iTunes yet. It's just on SoundCloud.
Okay. Well, okay. Here's another, and Brace, you told me about this is like, again, like if your brain isn't melted by the end of this episode, we haven't done our job. You like, okay. Dynacorp.
Dynacorp.
Yeah.
Dynacorp.
Dynacorp. Again, it's dinos.
They make the T-Rexes.
So Dynacorp is basically like a catch-all CIA contractor company. They do like trains for people. They do transportation. They just do all the shit that the CIA. It's the CIA, right? It's like it's a security contractor. They call themselves a global service provider. But they do a lot of flight stuff. They are very famous for doing a lot of fucked up stuff, but most famously for a child sex slavery ring in Bosnia in the 90s, and then later another child sex slavery ring in Afghanistan much more recently. Of course, Epstein is linked in like a million ways, and then there's like Leon Black that's linked to him, that's linked to fucking Blackwater.
Yeah.
Which is like directly linked to them, own fucking Blackwater, basically.
Through Apollo Management, right?
I can't remember what it's called. They all have all these fucking names. I got it written down somewhere. But Epstein's plane shared a fucking tail number with a Dynacorp plane. And Epstein borrowed a Dynacorp plane to go to his fucking sex ranch in 2002. Literally, like, he is like inseparable from them. That's really, I think, an important link is the link to Blackwater and the link to Dynacorp. Because a lot of it, like in the 90s, there was a huge epidemic of sex slavery coming out of the former Yugoslavia, because they would take these sort of desperate and white women and they would ship them to New York, where people like Epstein would either sign them up to Victoria's Secret models or keep them in sexual bondage for years. It's a pretty important link, and we'll be going on to. We're actually going to have a guest from the Balkans to describe this to us in an episode, but it is insane.
And then you said, what about Dan Blazarian? Sort of like a tech bro extraordinaire.
He's not really a tech bro.
What is he?
Okay, so Dan Blazarian's dad
was a mafia guy.
Right, Dan Blazarian's dad was a financial criminal, more or less, who embezzled like vast, like 8-figure sums. Dan went on to be washed out of Bud's training and become a poker player.
Okay.
But he has
same with me.
Real, no real involvement. No, I mean he's like founded a few websites and shit, but I wouldn't really call him a tech bro or a tech guy.
I mean, he sells like he's got like a weed company. It's like it's.
I thought his whole
much,
thing was just like Instagram posts with girls. Like,
well,
isn't that what he does?
And they're girls, but they're also like, you know, guys like Dan Bilzerian, who by the way has no chin, and I could beat his fucking ass allegedly. He like Bilzerian doesn't just like hang out with girls because girls want to hang out with Dan Bilzerian. Bilzerian gets modeling agencies like the ones that Epstein worked with to supply him with people who kind of straddle the line between prostitute and model. The other thing is Dan Bilzerian's, you know, he's a big gambler, right? Like he's always telling these stories about he gambled $500,000 and lost it and it wasn't a thing because Dan Bilzerian is laundering money for people. And he posted a picture a couple of years ago where he is flying above a series of islands. And if you look closely, and if you put it next to a picture of the islands next to the, you know, Little St. James, you realize that he's flying directly above St. James Island. There is virtually no way that Bilzerian and Epstein aren't connected. And especially because Bilzerian's whole thing is basically hiring prostitutes to hang out with him in like a rented private plane. It's almost certain that he allegedly was connected to the circles that Epstein himself allegedly either trafficked in or ran himself.
Allegedly.
Yeah, all of this is alleged, by the way.
This is
all hard alleged.
And we're not alleging this. Others have alleged it. We're just, you know, saying what they've said.
But back to like that. Basically, Epstein's plane was registered with a private security contractor associated with the CIA that's already been associated with not one but two human trafficking networks.
Garrett, there's more than that. I think they were associated with one in Haiti too. I know the Clinton initiative was, and actually there was a bunch of sex rings going on in Haiti pretty much since the 90s, or I'm sure before, but since the 90s that I know about. And yes, absolutely. Like it's Bilzerian shared the tail number, and he shared a fucking plane. He like used one of their planes to go to his sex ranch.
This is Epstein.
I think that
not Bilzerian.
This is Epstein.
Okay, yeah.
No, yeah, Bilzerian is not a rancher. You can tell by his jawline.
The like darkest endpoint of all of this is realizing like, oh, this is about global human trafficking and drug trafficking, and everyone is involved. Like that's like the probably craziest, darkest end.
Like I literally I just Googled Dan Bilzerian in quotes and Epstein, and that was like the first thing that came up. Like if you just Google anybody who has $2 million, they're friends with Epstein. Have you seen that thing about his black? Have you read the Black Book?
No, what's this?
Like all this, it's his list of phone numbers and people.
Oh, right, yeah.
He has like the fucking like the grandchildren, or excuse me, like the great grandchildren of the fucking Kaiser in there.
Oh my god! Literally, the guy from the end of the Hellfish Simpsons episode is in Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book.
It's insane. Like he has everybody in there, and it's like you know, obviously that doesn't prove anything. But the flight logs. I think it's people talk about the flight logs, but with the butler, the person who really like turned over the flight logs originally. Or who turned over the Black Book, excuse me. He said there were names circled in red that he circled. And his ex-butler, who died of probably the same cancer that Hugo Chavez died of, you know what I mean?
Oh, wait, okay, so actually, I was just going to bring up this butler thing, because again, like, I saw this through you, and again, like, it's just, you read this, and you're like, what the fuck? What the fuck?
Yeah, man.
He said, okay, Epstein's butler did 5 months longer in jail than Epstein did for the crime of not turning over his Black Book to investigators, which he claimed he needed as a form of life insurance, and now he's dead.
Yes. He died of cancer, which he got, and then 6 months later he died of.
Yeah, terrible life insurance.
Yeah. Well, he lost the book, and he was fined, I think, he was fined as well, and then sentenced to, a year and a half in jail. Insane. But he had circled certain names in red, and he had said that these people were involved. I believe there was like Spacey, Chris Tucker, Ghislaine Maxwell, obviously. But that hasn't really been reported on too much. I think it might be a little too close to home for certain magazines and newspapers.
Wasn't Dodi El-Fayed in the book too? Or was it his brother or something? Like the connections with the royal family is super fascinating to me as well.
It just was reported that apparently Prince Andrew and the Queen have been talking about his connection to Epstein and what it's going to do to the family.
You're killing your mother, Andy. You're killing your mother, Andy.
You're killing your mother, if that was possible, but we know it's not.
So Prince Andrew is Fredo and Jeffrey Epstein is Mo Green.
There's a really weird conspiracy theory that I really like, unsurprisingly, which is, do you remember when Kevin Spacey, like, when he got axed or he went down or he got canceled, whatever, and he did that weird YouTube video where he was like in character. Okay.
Yes, I remember.
So at the end of that video, which is like so weird for so many reasons, least of which is just like I'm imagining him talking to his personal assistant, like, we're gonna do this right now. Like no one else is involved. It's just his idea. So he at the end, he takes a sip from a mug and like shows the mug to the camera. And that mug has the like something about like God save the Queen. And so all these conspiracy theorists are saying it was like a message to the royal family.
I talked about this on the other podcast I did with Nick. So the mug is a commemoration of the Queen's coronation in 1951. And it's got the seal on it. It says Westminster Abbey, 2nd of June, 1953. And then it has a quote from her, presumably from her coronation. It says, "Throughout all my life and with all my heart, I shall strive to be worthy of your trust." And then
I'm sorry.
Spacey's main accuser on the stand pleads the fifth, and the case goes away.
It's done.
It's dead.
Free man.
Dead in the water. And there was a outpouring of not exactly the most convincing accounts on Twitter being like, see, look, I always said he was innocent. Like kind of bot looking accounts.
That's unfair to say about my account.
Yeah, I can't believe Chris Tucker is involved in this.
I know, I was wrong. I thought it wasn't him, but it is. It's the Rush Hour guy.
Same thing happened to me. I was like, oh, it's not really Chris Tucker, but it's fucking Chris Tucker.
And is Chris Tucker's name underlined in red?
No, he's just on. Yeah. He was on the African trip, the notorious African trip with Spacey and Clinton.
Matt, don't make me send you the picture of Chris Tucker, Bill Clinton, and Michael Jackson.
I know it exists.
I mean, we could probably talk about this all day, but I want to just like sort of reframe here at the end with like a larger like big picture question. Like Brace and Liz, like you brought up at the like beginning of the show this idea of kind of like false flag conspiracies. Like QAnon and Pizzagate, which we've made fun of heavily on this show, but yet like at a certain level begins to look more and more realistic in certain ways. However, at the same time, it's like you look into like, who is promoted and, disseminated these ideas or memes or conspiracy theory in our culture. And it's all people who are actually connected to this like literal satanic human trafficking community. But I want to say like broader about like conspiracy theories and how like seductive and easy to get involved or like, go down this rabbit hole. For instance, like we know for a fact that the U.S. Air Force propagated much of what became like the UFO mythology in this country during like the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Like they've pretty much copped to that, like of seeding like fake documents showing that the Air Force, like, was dealing with flying saucers to like certain, influencers or conspiracy people to make it seem like they were as a kind of way of distracting people from the shit that they're really up to. And I guess what I'm asking is like, how is there any way to know that this is all leading us down the wrong path, or is there anything politically useful out of this other than just of how insane and entertaining it all is?
Well, the depravity of has like never. I mean, fucking Catherine the Great got fucked by a horse. You know what I mean? Like these people have been depraved since the beginning of time.
Allegedly.
Well, no, I think
she's very litigious.
I've spoken to the horse, ridden it too, if you know what I mean.
Alan Dershowitz represents Catherine the Great. David Boyce represents the horse.
He sued a Russian peasant for $7 million. But so it's like there's a lot of there, and there is a lot of disinformation. We're trying to come at this from like a realistic perspective. which is like, I don't think that the Jews are behind it, which is kind of what QAnon is saying. I think that there are some of my people behind it, yes, but we're behind everything, so it doesn't really make any difference.
We're high achievers.
Exactly. I mean, it doesn't really, there's like nothing we can do right now, basically. And like, that is like, that I've like been trying to, well, I mean, we could do the same stuff that we would do otherwise, which is like try to like make sure all rich people go to prison, which would probably sort out a lot of these problems. But it's, and like make sure the prison is like a hole that like they can't get out of. But yeah, like it does kind of boggle the mind because it's like, well, what can I do about it? Like, I can't go arrest these people. I can't like, I don't know where the fuck Ghislaine Maxwell is right now.
No one does.
But the thing is, like, in court, this will never come out. So it is like, and this cannot just be like the territory of like kind of the Alex Jones, who is also kind of a disinformation guy because he puts in real stuff next to fake stuff. This has to be looked at with clear eyes and also with people with minds that can only say the word Epstein.
Matt, when you were on the podcast talking about the Dutroux affair, I mean, I think it is good to remember that when all of that was happening, like almost 400,000 people in Belgium were out in the streets protesting.
Yes.
Like it ended up bringing down a lot of the government. And its legacy in Belgium has been like really terrible for all the politicians there.
Yeah, they've been pretty. They haven't really had a functional government since then.
Yeah,
but also at the same time, nothing would ever really came from it. Dutroux is still in jail. He's never followed up on anything he is or anyone else has said. The thing I think that's so fascinating about this, and the reason I think a lot of people are fixating on it, not just because it's got a lot of meme potential, which obviously it does, but because in a world where, as Felix likes to point out, everything is always the same every day, only somehow slightly worse, and it doesn't feel like there's any way out of anything. This whole Epstein thing felt like it was maybe a chance to get some sort of revelation, some reckoning, some peek through the miasma at like the actual workings of power that are obscured by the daily fire hydrant of idiocy and bullshit that we're trying to reckon with. And then the fact that the fucking came out, they were willing to do the thing of just in public, in front of everyone, with all of the fucking world's attention on it, try to murk the motherfucker in jail. Honestly, I feel like that's a 2-for-1. Like if it works, hey, good. Epstein's done for. We don't have to worry about it anymore. But honestly, one way or the other, even if it works or not, what we're getting the message from is that you can't win. There will be no revelation. There will be no reckoning, no matter what. We run this shit. And you walk out every day knowing what happened, knowing that they were willing to do that they were willing to hire some greaseball to try to fucking murk Epstein in front of everybody when it's the biggest domestic story going, without any fear that people are going to go, what the fuck? Because all they can do is say, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And there's nothing else to do about it.